Steele Plus tour with 9 selections. Fourth straight week for this tour, and the current record after last week's 7-3 is now 21-6-1. So pretty good record. Plus, you get a nice tour of how to use Phil Steele Plus, which is the site I created for myself to use. It's my own personal logs that go back 40 years of information on Phil Steele Plus, and it's all at your fingertips. Just $39.99, but I'll give you a discount in today's tape, and I'll get to that in a minute. But let's start out with the first game for today, because I know you're here for the games. And while we go through the games, I give you a tour how to use Phil Steele Plus. So let's start here. You go to Phil Steele Plus, go to FBS Info and click on that. Then you click on Team Pages. Get your nice menu here. Now, if you're not familiar with the conferences as I am, you can go down here and get them alphabetically as well. Then, of course, you got the NFL team pages, FCS pages, and more. First game we're going to look at is Western Kentucky against Florida International. This one's I'm calling my misleading game of the week. Now, we'll start with last year's game. You look at Western Kentucky against Florida International last year. And by the way, when you have a team page up, this is for all 130 teams. The green numbers are good numbers. The red numbers are bad numbers. Look how Western Kentucky ran the football last year. Okay, they didn't run the football. 61 yards per game, 2.0 yards per carry. This year, they're definitely improved in that aspect. Not great, but much improved. 119 yards per game, 3.5. But you can go back and look at all the stats all the way back at your fingertips from 2009. Spend hundreds of thousands of dollars getting all this stuff together each year, compiling it, and it's at your fingertips. Take a look at last year's game, which is our first piece of the misleading piece. So we go to 2017, and we see Western Kentucky lost 41-17. But look at this. They had a 401-373 yard edge, 23-18 first down edge. The culprit, -3 in turnovers, and it looks like a blowout loss on the road. Now they get this game at home this year. And when you look at Western Kentucky, I thought they played a good game against Wisconsin. Losing to Wisconsin by 31 in Madison is not a bad thing. Maine, they jumped out, and you can click on these box scores here, and it gives you the thing. They jumped out to a quick 21-0 lead. I think they led up against an FCS team. They did have a 387, 326-yard edge, but ended up losing. Louisville, I actually used them here on the Phil Steele Plus tour. Mentioned the game grades. I had them even with Louisville. I think they were almost a 3-touchdown underdog. They outplayed Louisville, 428-292, 26-17 first downs. Should have won the game outright, but didn't. Beat Ball State on the road. I thought that was an impressive win, 28-20. Marshall, they took to the wire, 20-17 was the final score, and that's a very good Marshall team. Marshall needed a touchdown, as you see here, with 1:44 left in the game to get past them on a 32-yard touchdown pass, or they could have beaten Marshall at home. They went into Charlotte, and that's a bad game. Everybody's entitled to one bad game. We'll let them slide on that. And then Old Dominion last week, I don't know if you saw the ending on that. Just a remarkable ending. ESPN.com has it right there. Just go to ESPN.com, scroll down, and look for the ending of that game. It's remarkable. Western Kentucky probably should have won that game and did not. So they have been much better than this 1-6 record. Now we go over here to Florida International. The Indiana game, they lost by 10. At the end of the game, Indiana was actually at their 1-yard line. They could have made that a 17-point loss. As it was, Indiana had a 465, 227-yard edge. Now, the Old Dominion game, they were losing at the half, 20-14, 306-226. Game got delayed. When they came back, Old Dominion's crowd was pretty much gone. There was nobody left in the stands. FIU fought back and won at 28-20. Good game here against UMass, but I believe when we look at UMass, Andrew Ford is UMass's quarterback. He missed the game, or started and got injured. Comas is the backup, didn't do well. And they went to third string on Michael Curtis for the majority of that game. And then we'll take a look here. Miami of Florida. Now the Miami game, once again going to the box, 31-0 Miami. And Miami in the fourth quarter, you see this 85-yard drive, 6 minutes and 57 to go, 319, 135. FIU put up 17 points in the last 6:57. And prior to this, Miami got stopped on 4th and 1 deep in FIU territory, or they could have made it 38-0. This was a blowout. The score does not show a blowout. It's misleading. 488 to 187 was the yards. Arkansas Pine Bluff, big deal. Middle Tennessee State 24 to 21. Now they caught Middle. Let me show you what Middle was going through at this point. Come over here, Middle Tennessee State. Middle had just played FAU in a huge game and got the upset. Then they went on the road to Marshall and played a huge game and got the upset. Now it was their third straight game on the road, and to top it off, if we go look at the individual stats here, you will see that Brett Stockstill, their star quarterback. We all know Middle Tennessee's a much better team with Brett Stockstill than without him. He got injured after hitting 6 of 7 passes. Backup Asher O'Hara came in, hit 9 of 20. FIU got the win at home, 24-21, catching Middle Tennessee in a bad spot without their quarterback. And last week they beat Rice 36 to 17. That was actually only 16 to 10 at the half. In that game, FIU would tack on a couple of late scores here. It was 26-17, a fairly decently close game. A couple of late scores for FIU turned it into a blowout. So FIU not as good as this 5-2 record. Western Kentucky much better than their 1-6 record. Western Kentucky in a must-win situation at home. But because of the current records that are up there, you'll find that Florida International is actually a 3.5-point road favorite here. So I'm going to take the home underdog, Western Kentucky, 1-6 Western Kentucky, to pull the upset. They are a 3.5-point dog. Now, last week, our matchup game of the week was Maryland against Iowa. And I told you, if Maryland can't run the football, they usually don't win. Well, we're going right back with Maryland as the matchup game of the week this week, because Iowa shut them out last week, 23-0. Look at this. Maryland had 68 yards rushing on 23 carries, just as I had pointed out would probably happen last week, and they ended up losing 23-0. Well, look at their losses. 68 yards rushing here, 147 here, 132 against Temple. And let's take a look at their wins, actually. 444 yards rushing against BG, 315 against Minnesota, 290 against Rutgers. They beat two Big Ten teams by 29 and 27 points at home. Why? Because they were able to run the football. So your big question this week is, can Maryland run the football? The answer is yes. Let's take a look at Illinois' rush column. And this is what I love about the green and the red. Points out your deficiencies at a glance. 387 yards a game to Penn State, 7.6 yards per carry. In fact, on the year, in Big Ten play, 273 yards on the ground, 6.1 yards per carry. They're giving their opponents 117 yards above their season average. That's number 119 in the FBS. Let's take a look at Maryland's defense, by the way. And on my Twitter, and if you go to Twitter, let's see what we've got here. Go to notifications. Oh, no, we'll just go here to profile. And on Twitter, posted this week the defensive yards per play. And this is offense. That's offense and defense combined. By the way, it's at Phil Steele 042. Look who appeared on here when I was typing this in. Top defenses in yards per play allowed. Maryland's number 11 in the country, giving up 4.54. They're up there with Michigan, Miami of Florida, Clemson, Temple. Those are some pretty damn good defenses, and Maryland's up there. 4.54 yards per play. They only allow 3.4 yards per carry, 51% completions, hold opponents to 67 yards per game below their season average. And for Illinois last week, go back to team page, Illinois. And Illinois had gotten A.J. Bush back. A.J. Bush struggled last week, even got put on the bench. Look at A.J. Bush for the game. He was 2 of 8 for 10 yards. They went to M.J. Rivers late. So they're struggling at the quarterback position. They're not going to be able to throw the ball. If they can't run, they're in trouble, and Maryland stops the run well. Now, they did give up 224 yards to Iowa, but only 4.4 yards per carry. And in Big Ten play, just 3.8 yards per carry this year. So it's my matchup game of the week. We're using Maryland again, but this time we're going with Maryland at home. I believe they're about minus. Let's take a quick look and see what the line is on this game. I believe they're about minus 18. Looking for the line right now. There it is, 17.5. So we're going to take Maryland minus 17 or 17.5. There are some 17s up there, so let's try to get that number. Maryland minus 17 over Illinois. Well, the average game grade, 6-1 now. What a tough loss that was last week for East Carolina. If you played East Carolina last week, it made the bad beats on SportsCenter, Scott Van Pelt. And here's why. When they played UCF last week, they were playing well. In the fourth quarter, it's 23-10. They're getting 21.5 points last week, and it looked like a sure average game grade winner. They're deep in UCF territory, and they try a jump pass right here. They could have made it 23-17. They're at about the 2-yard line. And if they get the touchdown, it's 23-17, and it's locked up and sealed. Throws a jump, or tries to throw a jump pass, fumbles. UCF returns it for a touchdown. Now, East Carolina is still covering, 30-10, no problem. UCF gets the ball back in their own territory, just trying to run out the clock. 3rd down and 6. McCray breaks off a 74-yard TD run. It looks like a 27-point blowout. East Carolina actually had a 496, 427-yard edge, 29-22 first down edge, and that 427 includes this late 74-yard run. So East Carolina played much better than the final score and probably should have covered that game. Tough beat if you played East Carolina last week. But let's take a look at this week's average game grade play, and it's going to be it's 6-1 on the year. We're going to take a look at Air Force and Boise State. Now, Boise has been dominant at times, and they're usually a really good road favorite. They beat Troy on the road here, 56-20. They did lose to Oklahoma State thanks to 2 block punts, but they pounded Wyoming by 20. Only beat Nevada by 4, and now they have to play at Air Force. Now, of concern would be the fact that Air Force struggled to roll the ball against Nevada and then San Diego State, but of course San Diego State always shuts down the option. And really in that game, the San Diego State game, Air Force, which is playing a lot better, this was the key play of the game right here. Air Force leads 9-7. There's 8 seconds left in the half. They're just punting the ball away. They're going to go in the locker room with the lead. Punt gets blocked, return for a touchdown. San Diego State gets up 14-9 and holds on for the 4-point win. I thought they played a very good San Diego State team, even up, maybe even should have won the game on the road. Now they're at home. Average game grade shows that Boise is playing at a level of 94.9, and Air Force is playing at a level over here of 85.8. Now, when you factor in a 3.5-point home field edge, that's going to put that up for Air Force, and it's coming up. Air Force is 5.22 better than the line, average game grades versus the line. Boise is actually a decent-sized road favorite here. They're a 9.5-point road favorite. So these average game grades say take Air Force plus 9.5 over Boise State this week is your average game grade play of the week. Now, these average game grades, how they work, they take into account yards, the points, but also the yards rushing, yards passing, total offense, and the defense the same, but it's against the opponent played. As an example, you'll see that here is 2 losses for Boise State. They got crushed by Oklahoma State by 23 points. It earned an 84 game grade, but San Diego State, they only lost by 6. Yet it only earned a 76-point grade. Why is that? Well, the San Diego State game, they were outgained by 38 yards at home. The Boise State game, thanks to 2 block punt touchdowns, they actually were only outgained by 8 yards on the road against Oklahoma State. Takes into account home and away as well. So all that's factored into your game grade. The average game grade just takes all these, divides them by the amount of games, and comes out here. You'll see that, once again, 94-85, home field edge factored in. It's about Boise by 4-something points in that game. Now, the FCS computer plays have been doing great, right? So I gave you some, I'm going to give you FBS computer play this week, just one play. And we're going to take a look at Syracuse at North Carolina State. And I use this one because I like the situation as well for Syracuse. Now, NC State, the computer, first of all, is saying Syracuse should win the game, and they are a home underdog. I've seen through the years that Syracuse plays a lot better as a dog. They get fired up. Look at this Florida State game. They were fired up as a home dog. They wanted to prove something. They did. They smacked down Florida State, outgained them by 201 yards. They were a large dog at Clemson, nearly pulled the upset on the road. In fact, had a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter in Death Valley. Then the very next week, they're probably patting themselves on the back, off the win, and they're a favorite against Pitt. They came up short on the road. And last week, they were almost a double-digit favorite against North Carolina. I pointed out I like North Carolina in that game. The Tar Heels didn't disappoint. They still had 546 yards. And the thing you got to like about Syracuse as well is when you look at the individual player stats, Eric Dungey has been the offense the last couple of years, but he's struggled at a couple of games this year, and Tommy DeVito led the upset win over Florida State. State, and last week led them to the comeback win over North Carolina. So it's nice to have a Tommy DeVito in the bullpen. And you'll like this about Phil Steele Plus. This is updated every week. This is every player's stats, so you can see that Dungy ran for 200 yards in the opener, hasn't topped 100 since then running the football. They've been protecting him a little bit more. Your top running backs, your top one, Ed Neal, got 116 yards. But I love the individual player stats. Also, if you want to go back while I'm here looking at these, this is the last 40 years' results. You want to know a score and a line and who covered back in 1976 in a game? It's there. It's at your fingertips since 1976. And over here, complete statistical breakdown every year, who the coach was, what the record was, what the conference record was, conference yards per game, overall yards per game, everything at your fingertips, every team, all 130 teams. It's an amazing resource. And if you know how to use it, which is why I have these tutorials, you just open up a whole bunch of things that you can have access to. Start charts are updated mostly for the teams, but you get an idea. You can see the offensive line here. There was one change there. Other than that, the offensive line's been pretty stable for Syracuse. So once again, we've got Syracuse in the home dog, which is where they excel. Now we take a look at NC State. I wasn't overwhelmed with their game against James Madison. The Georgia State game, they played a weak opponent, beat them at home. Marshall was actually a 10-point game, and when we click on the Marshall, you'll see that Marshall had the ball down 10, and then a 57-yard interception return for a touchdown with 28 seconds to go in the game turned it into a 17-point win for NC State. I watched that game, and I thought Marshall played them pretty even up. They did beat a good Virginia team at home, but only outgained them by 82 yards. They beat Boston College without A.J. Dillon, and they did dominate in the first half, but it got close in the second half, and then got crushed in their test. Now, I have a bubble burst theory, which is, teams are unbeaten. They get that first loss, and it sort of deflates them. Unbeaten, ranked, we're going to win the ACC? No, you're not. You're not even close. Clemson smashed them last week, 41-7. It's 24-0 at the half. Probably in for a little bit of a letdown this week. So as good as NC State is, I love Syracuse as a home dog, and they're catching NC State in a favorable situation. So my computer play this week is the computer like Syracuse outright. I'm buying it. I'm taking Syracuse outright. Now, last week I gave you Wisconsin off a loss. Perfect record, and they delivered. This week we're going to look at Bill Snyder off a bye, but with some added ammunition as well. The last 12 times Coach Bill Snyder, and I think he's one of the best head coaches out there, has been off a bye. They're 11-1 against the spread. The one game they didn't cover was here, Baylor. I think they were laying like 15, and they won the game by 13 points. But it's a game that they could easily have covered. They were up 20-3 at the half. But still, I'll take 11-1 against the spread off a bye any day of the week. Now, Oklahoma's dangerous. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. Those 3 touchdowns against Texas in a matter of minutes makes it scary. Crushed TCU last week. They're at home. I would imagine the average game grades are probably saying Oklahoma wins this, but there's more to it than just the talent on the field. As you know, Bill Snyder, one of the best underdog coaches out there, and didn't look good as an underdog. He lost against Mississippi State and West Virginia. Well, I guess can't handle it. 3 straight underdog winners: Texas, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and he is now 24-9 as a 23-7, as an away underdog the last 30 tries. And the final thing I'm going to look at in this game is if you go back to this Army game, Army's strategy was to run the football and keep Oklahoma off the field. That they did. In fact, in the second half, Oklahoma only had 3 possessions. Kansas State runs an option type of offense. Not the triple option, no. But with their mobile quarterbacks, Skylar Thompson and Alex Delton, you see Thompson's got 305 yards rushing, Delton 143. They usually run the option. They did well against Baylor. And they've got a veteran offensive line coming back this year as well, which is really helpful. Almost the entire unit back. Last year against Oklahoma, they ran the ball for 268 yards, 6.4 yards per carry. It was only a 7-point home loss. You got to like that. The entire O-line is back. They're getting the run game going. Alex Barnes looking great, averaging 5.7 yards per carry, and they settled on Skylar Thompson at QB. Now, when you get a team that can run the ball, like they did here against Oklahoma State, like they did here against Baylor, it shrinks the field. And Oklahoma definitely has a defense you can run on. In fact, Oklahoma's defense was rated right here, number 69 holding opponents to 10 yards per game below their season average. So if they shrink the field, lessen the possessions for Oklahoma, that's another plus. And Kansas State is getting like 24.5 points here. So it's Bill Snyder off a bye, 11-1. That's worth taking 24.5 points with Kansas State this week. And the final one we're going to look at in the FBS action is Kentucky and Missouri. Now, I brought Missouri on last week because I talked about how Drew Lock just dominates non-Power 5 bowl teams. If you're not a Power 5 bowl team, forget about it. Drew Lock, 64 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions, delivered the winner last week for this segment with another strong game. Let's see what his stats were. 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 350 yards passing. Let's look at his previous 3 games. Alabama, South Carolina, Georgia, all bowl teams, 1 touchdown, 5 interceptions. And this just in, Kentucky's going to make a bowl game. And Kentucky's actually got a pretty good defense. Let's take a look at Kentucky's defense this year. They are holding opponents to 108 yards below their season average. That's number 11 in the country. Look at the numbers they got here. They're allowing 53.3% completions. They get 20 sacks. They're only allowing 3.4. So Missouri's taking on a good defense. That means Drew Lock's huge passing numbers he's put up over his career will probably be slowed down. Look at all these big green numbers here. Look at these numbers here, 221, 204, 142. Taking on a pretty good defense in Kentucky, especially allowing just 53.3%. Now, Kentucky let me down last week. I used them as an inside the press box play. I had them on ESPN. I thought they were going to beat Vanderbilt by double digits. They only won 14-7. I was disappointed in the game. I could talk about a few plays, but bottom line, they didn't cover against Vandy. That's why I'm a little light on them this week, but I'll tell you what, they got a team that can run the football. Missouri last week against Memphis did give up 200 yards rushing, 4.7. So I think if Kentucky can run the football, let's hope they don't have to pass, they should be able to stay within the number. And I think Drew Lock and this potent Missouri offense will be more like this than they were in these big green numbers here. So my play here is to take Kentucky plus the full 7 against Missouri this week. Now let's move on to those FCS plays. 6-0. And got a couple of them for you this week. I'm going to just go to FCS team pages here. And there you go. Got the complete alphabetical list. And we're going to go to FCS team pages here. You got your complete alphabetical list. The first game I'm going to look at is one you've probably been talking about, the water cooler all week. And that is Charleston Southern and Kennesaw State. So let's take a look at Charleston Southern. Well, I actually like to put the visitor on the left. So the visitor is Kennesaw State, and they are taking on Charleston Southern. Now, Kennesaw State's a good team. They lost to Georgia State by 4. They have blown out Tennessee Tech, Alabama State, Clark, Atlanta, Samford, Presbyterian, Gardner-Webb, all by an average of 48-12 this year. They're plus 213 yards per game. Well, that's why they're a 23-point road favorite here. Charleston Southern did lose to Florida big. They played Elon and only lost by 9. But, I showed you what a good team Kennesaw State is. Let's go take a look at how good Elon is. Elon's been blowing out opponents on a regular basis. That James Madison's a very good team. And yet they only beat Charleston Southern by 9. They have a loss to USF. And a loss to Delaware. But Elon's a pretty good team, and Charleston Southern played them within 9. They beat Hampton. I don't know anything about how they could possibly lose to Savannah State. That's sort of embarrassing, and once again, if it's a one-game thing, I'm just going to write it off. I just don't know what happened. They beat Virginia Lynchburg. They beat Presbyterian. Now, can they play with Kennesaw State? Well, last year they lost to them on the road 38-0, but the previous year they beat them at home 28-7. And I don't know, they beat them here 28-14. So they had been playing with them, didn't play a good game last year. I think Charleston Southern's a team that's under the radar right now, getting 23.5 points at home. And my computer only calls for Charleston Southern to win, or for Kennesaw State to win this one, 38-26. That's 12 points. They're getting 23 at home. I'll take the big points with an underrated Charleston Southern team who has proved against Elon that they can play with them. And the loss to Florida, I understand that one as well. The other one we're going to look at is Colgate against Georgetown. And this one is one where I think Colgate gets a shutout. And that's sounds like it might be going out on a limb, but it's really not. Let's take a look at Colgate and Georgetown here. First of all, look at Colgate's defense. You probably didn't know this about Colgate. I didn't know about it until I looked at it on philsteele.com last night. 3-0-0-3-0. They have given up 0 touchdowns in 5 weeks and 2 field goals. That's good. This just in, that's pretty good. So you've got a dominant defense for Colgate, allowing just 249 yards per game, 2.7 yards per carry, 55.4. Here they take on a Georgetown offense that's got 254, 112, look at all these red numbers, 168 yards against Lafayette. Now, 363 yards against Lehigh. That got my attention, and I said, maybe their offense is getting a lot better. Then what I did is I just clicked back and looked at the Lehigh page. And when you look at the Lehigh page, we see that their defense had just allowed 629, 500, 733, and 488. 363 made that Lehigh defense the best they'd been against an FBS school all season long. They're feeling pretty good about themselves defensively after getting absolutely destroyed, and that's why Georgetown was able to move the ball here. So you've got an offense that I don't see moving the football against a dominant defense. Colgate, offensively, they're not explosive. They don't have to be. And they only have Fordham on deck, by the way, and Fordham is a team that Georgetown beat 23-11. These 3 teams that Georgetown is on this 3-game win streak sort of reminds me of when UTSA got on that 3-game win streak this year, and then I used Louisiana Tech against them on the road. It was 3 weak teams, 3 close wins, and now they take on a very good team. And how'd they do last year? Well, last year I'm a little surprised. Georgetown actually got 10 points on Colgate, 144 yards. 35-10 was the final score. 21-6 first down edge for Colgate last year. 38-10 the previous year. 147 yards for Georgetown. And I think this Georgetown offense is struggling more than the past couple of years. Their defense is absolutely dominant. I mean, last year they gave up 17 points per game. This year they're giving up 4. Love good defense. Wanted to bring up a defense like this. And my computer, it's a strange forecast. Calls for Colgate to win the game 29 to -9. So I just take the -9 and throw it on them, make it 38-0. But that's pretty much calling for a shutout. Yeah, the spread's up there, 24.5, but I like Colgate -24.5 in a shutout win over Georgetown. Now let's go show you. And by the way, the FCS, like here, Colgate, you can go back on Colgate and get every single game since 2010. Series history, how they've been playing, color-coded green and red, so you could see at a glance. This is a good Colgate team after a rough start. Here they were a poor team. Takes you right through it the whole way. This is a good Colgate team this year, though. Really enjoying that. Now let's go to the NFL team pages. We're going to go over one game for you in the NFL, and that's going to be San Francisco and Arizona. And this one's just because, to me, it's one of those misleading final games like Western Kentucky against FIU. And when we click on this one, first of all, I am amazed at Arizona's offense. Look at this. They have exactly 0. Is David Johnson on this team? Yes, David Johnson, the same David Johnson that had this type of season, 1239 and 80. They can't run the football even with David Johnson. Their best performance running the football was 92 yards. They're averaging 65 yards per game on the ground. Look at this team offense. They have 0 offense, 269 yards. Who's the one team they beat this year? Well, San Francisco on the road. Now they've got them at home. That's why the line is where it is. Arizona's actually pick them in this game and against San Francisco. And why did they beat them in that game? Well, look at this. San Francisco had a 447 to 220-yard edge, 33-10 first down edge in that game. They were -5 in turnovers. They absolutely dominated the game, except they turned the ball over. I am not trusting Arizona against anybody. They're off a 45-10 loss to Denver. They've got one win this year was a game they were outgained by 227 yards. Then you look at Frisco. I thought they played a good game against Minnesota. Now, granted, Garoppolo was there for that one. They beat Detroit at home. They did have Garoppolo, but then without they lost Garoppolo in the Kansas City game. That's not a bad game against KC. Losing by 11 against the Chiefs. The Chiefs have covered like 13 in a row against the spread. And the Chargers, they go into L.A., and they lose that game by 2. That was with Beathard at quarterback. Let me double-check that, make sure. Beathard, quarterback, Chargers, yes. Chargers, very good team. Chargers' only losses this year have been to Kansas City and the Rams. And yet they only lost by 2 against the Chargers, outgained by 4 yards. Then came that ridiculous game against Arizona. They go into Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers is there, all that. Lose the game by 3 points. That's not a bad game. And then last week against the Rams, the one number I want to focus on is right here. How about 331 yards they held the Rams to? If you go over here, it tells you where they rank. That was the best performance of any defense against the Rams all year. They held them to 331 yards. So you have yourself a pretty good defense. Number 12 in the NFL, holding teams to 15 yards below their season average. If they hold Arizona to 15 yards below their season average, they get 206 total yards. And as shown, I mean, they've been moving the ball every time except last week against a good Rams team. The Rams are arguably the best team in football. So, they've played KC, they've played the Rams. These guys have not played KC or the Rams. I'm taking San Francisco over Arizona. And watch that. One thing is the spread streak. Remember, when you ride on a spread streak, you win many times, you lose only once. Kansas City has been on a roll. I believe they covered 1, 2, 3, 4 regular season games in a row here, then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They're undefeated against the spread this year as well. So spread streaks are always worth looking at. That'll do it for your Phil Steele Plus. Oh, a couple of quick notes for you. Should have got to it earlier. First of all, you go to the home page and you go to the store. And when you go to the store, what I want you to do is come over here to Phil Steele Plus Season Pass. Click on that. And when you go there, we're going to order now at $39. And when you get there, you're going to type in, I'm going to order it now. It's probably going to come up with multiples. I just ordered it twice. That's why. Let me reduce that back down to 1. So now we're going to update my cart. $39. When you type in the code word over here, I didn't type anything in, but your code word this week is going to be helmet. That's helmet. HELMET. All right. Don't even know how to type. HELMET. And when you type in the code word helmet, apply your coupon. This comes down to $29 for Phil Steele Plus. It'll be up there. And maybe it does that because I'm already a Phil Steele Plus member. But it's $29 when you type in the code word helmet. And you get access to all this through the Super Bowl. FCS, FBS, NFL, everything you could possibly want information-wise, $29.99 when you type in the code word helmet. And don't forget to go to InsideThePressBox.com this week and get my weekly newsletter. Now, I have all 55 games broken down by my computer, all 55 games broken down by me, and you get a complete analysis on each one. Now, last week was actually a losing week for Inside the Press Box, so the record over the last 5 weeks drops all the way down to 22, 11, and 1. When you go to InsideThePressBox.com, if you type in the code word, we're going to use it again, helmet, you'll get $20 off any season package or 50% off the weekly subscription package. So that's InsideThePressBox.com. The code word is helmet, and when you do that, take 50% off this weekend's selections or $20 off any season package. That'll do it for your tour. Hopefully we stay red hot, 21, 6, and 1, and I will be back with you next week with your Inside the Press Box tour with selections.